So when I was in college, I was reading a lot of the German philosopher Nietzsche, and one of his, maybe that explains my personality. Is that why you're laughing? Is that why you're laughing, Jason? So anyway, one of the titles of his books was Twilight of the Idols, and then as I remember it, the subtitle was something like How to Do Philosophy with a Hammer, you know? And you know, the natural image was like the image of you know, smashing idols with a hammer, but actually he was referring to like a hammer as in like a tuning fork by which you can hit the idol to see what's inside, if anything. And so I wanted to say something about the Dharma and ideals, idealism, and disillusionment, and faith. I think we often come to the Dharma, come to practice with kind of distrust in institutions, you know? Like, a little skepticism, or maybe even feeling heartbroken by our society, or family, or education system, or our government. And that kind of, there's a certain disillusionment that probably many of us began with. And for some people, there's even a question like, can I trust myself? Can I trust the human condition? Can I trust other people? And that kind of like wounding, in a way, makes us both distrustful of authority within the spiritual realm, but also really kind of poised in a way for idealization and overvaluation, you know. It's like sometimes we find ourselves, heartbroken over various authorities, but then we think we've found the authority that we can invest in, right? And I'm not being dismissive of that, as you'll hear. It cuts both ways. It's complicated. On the one hand, as I talked about a few weeks ago, that we are really asked to surrender to the Dharma, and often surrender to a teacher. But we're also on a path that is very strongly emphasizes self-reliance and the phrase becoming independent in the Dharma, you know, to become independent in the Dharma. Now, how power and authority are held really varies in different traditions a lot. One Tibetan teacher, translator, Ken MacLeod, when he went, I think 1970, to study with Kalu Rinpoche, a kind of senior Tibetan Lama. After the kind of like initial phase of being with this teacher, said like he took some kind of formal commitment vow, and at that point, Kalu Rinpoche said to the student, "Now I am your father. Learn Tibetan." That was his. Now, that wouldn't fly if I said that. Um, how authority is held varies a lot, right? And for me, I was very wary of power, and I was definitely not looking for any hero when I stumbled into the Dharma. I wasn't. I was pretty kind of just very hesitant, dipping my toe in very gradually. But the practice was kind of, it wasn't easy, some people sit down and initially they have good concentration or insight or something like that, or it's really insightful, but it wasn't like that for me at all. It was a grind, but there was something really pulling my heart. And I was in this kind of awkward phase of not really wanting to trust anybody, not really wanting to get into a whole thing, and sort of standing with one foot out the door in relation to practice. But there was this just growing sense of the possibility of it. And so I kind of tried to stay open to what was being offered, tried to stay open to authority. But it's complicated. Now, when I think about authorities, there is something quite beautiful about being able to look up to someone or a lineage. And it's said that our faith is not actually something that the practice culminates in faith, but the practice actually begins with some faith, meaning that once we've known suffering, there's some sense of faith that gets us even moving down the path, even practicing for a second time. And I think in being with spiritual friends and teachers, it's very, it can be very inspiring. I was very inspired by the models that I saw, that I could see oh, this person has been, their heart feels transformed in some way. It was actually my first connection with practice was this young woman that I was in high school with. And I remember she's the daughter of I learned a famous meditation teacher, but I knew she meditated, and I had this admiration for her because I just felt intuitively that she knew something that I didn't know. And I didn't want to meditate, but I wanted to know what she knew. And I could just just feel it, and it was nice to feel to look up to her, even though we're in the same grade, and the process of respecting or at times maybe idealizing a teacher, a lineage, is important insofar as so much of the suffering that we've faced has been relational in nature. And the healing doesn't have to be relational, but it often must be, when I think about certain emotional experiences, like shame, for example, that a lot of that really needs to be repaired through the gaze of the other, through a respectful, loving relationship, and teachers can provide some of that. Now I find myself, there's been a lot of kind of warmth and affection for teachers and authorities. Some people I don't even know. I just heard talks online, but feel very close to them. And you know, for when people first get into the practice, a lot of times they're coming in with a lot of suffering. And the idealization, the sort of sense of the perfection of a lineage or a teacher or something, that can really serve a lot of psychological purpose. It can be really important. It can be almost like life-saving for some people to come in and be able to feel like, I can deeply trust this teacher, this lineage. But idealization is inherently fragile, right? It's like, it's just fragile. So some years ago I heard this story about a Pentecostal bishop, preacher who, his he had a huge, like 5,000 person congregation, and had this, religion was like the orienting force in his life. And, the role of the Bible is like, is like this, we could say this idealized object. And the story was about his kind of revelation and transformation into like no longer believing in hell, no longer feeling that non-believers or anyone was destined for hell, And it's this like incredibly touching story about like what gets lost when we let go of idealization, And in my case, I didn't think I was doing a lot of idealization. Like I thought I was already disillusioned, And it was only when I was like very deeply let down by a teacher that I realized how much maybe idealization was going on. And so this was not this is not my teacher. I had spent some time with him, but this was really my teacher's teacher, the Sasaki Roshi. And there's no need to get into it, but it's the kind of Cliff Note version is that it is like somebody who nobody disputed that he had very deep understanding, wisdom, enlightenment. By any criteria, he would have met that, right? And yet, over a period, it was a kind of open secret of like doing a great deal of sexual harm to students over decades, And so this was like formally acknowledged and just exploded the whole community. And I had seen some stuff like that before, but and this wasn't even my teacher, but it hit me really deeply. It really did. It felt like, how like as kids we like, there's a part of us that really hopes our parents are perfect, and that, like in some ways, like when I really think back on my childhood mind, like I was really hoping that my parents were kind of like free of suffering, like they were liberated. That was the sort of fantasy, you know? And then to actually see their suffering in a very concrete way was, you know, like that was a slow learning process as a child that we all go through in some way. And with, in the Dharma, it was a very, very painful time, and you know, the traditional kind of response to that is when there's a teacher who's like really deep, really enlightened, and doing a lot of harm, the traditional response is, well, it's possible to have a lot of wisdom and be uncultivated in some aspects, you know? Or Joseph Goldstein has made the distinction that there's a difference between power and wisdom, you know? And sometimes we get those confused in people. I appreciate that, but none of that put my heart at ease, you know? Because this was the question for me. If enlightenment can coexist with the depth of harmful behavior that was perpetrated, what's the value of enlightenment? If that doesn't protect us against truly destructive harm, what's the value of it? And that question kind of haunted me for some time, you know? I feel like, probably a few years trying to figure this out. And there was a real process of kind of a revaluation of the Dharma for me. Like, what is it? What does it do? What does enlightenment, or these sort of like classical experiences, what do they get you? What do they buy you? And what don't they buy you? You know? And as a consequence of this kind of seeking and searching, I would say that for me, it's made me a little more kind of suspicious of the kind of grand and maybe grandiose claims to truth, you know, like capital T, truth. And it's made me, in a way, trust like love more deeply than the pursuit of truth. Like just the kindness that we can actually see in a very direct, simple way. Like it's made me trust that more deeply. Like that doesn't look as kind of sexy as a lot of the aspects of wisdom or concentration or something, but that to me is like the sort of ultimate arbiter, is like how much suffering is spilling out from your own heart into the world. Now, it hasn't made practice less urgent. You know, it's still, like there's a moment where it would have been very easy to commit my life to a whole other path. While this was going on, it would have been easy just to do research and to have like a nice little life and money, probably. But it, like, there was never an actual like rupture like with the Dharma. There was always like some confidence that I don't know what this is. I don't know all that's possible or what we get from practice, but there aren't any viable alternatives, you know. And it changed how I think about teaching. If one's teaching mindfulness in a kind of, more narrow, circumscribed way, maybe that's one thing. But if you're teaching Dharma and you're asking people to invest deeply, invest their heart, right? To persevere through suffering, to keep going. If you're asking for all of this, and if you're asking for their open hearts, then it becomes vital that the teacher cares for their own heart and their own capacity to do harm very diligently, And so that means that there shouldn't be any part of, for me in this situation, like there's no part of my life that is unreflected here in the hall. There are no like fragments of my experience that don't, in a sense, have a place within the Dharma and with what I'm saying. And so, like Gandhi said, you can't do right in one sphere of life and wrong in another. Life is an indivisible whole. And so this kind of journey of some idealization, disillusionment, and then a faith in the Dharma in a new way. And I think we all actually have to go through it, and often it's more than one loop through, But I'm left still with the Dharma. It's become a little humbler, but I'm still left with. I still have heroes and people whose heart I would entrust anyone, including my own too. I still have a lot of hope for what the practice can do. I have a lot of hope for us. Let's just sit for a minute. Just a couple announcements. As I said Friday, Michael Taft's class starts tomorrow, a 6-week class on go with the flow, meaning that it'll be a kind of in-depth exploration of impermanence at the level of sense experience, which the Buddha emphasized. And then on the 15th, Chandra Easton is doing Feeding Your Demons. So some of you, who's been sat with her before? Okay, so some of you know the practice. Yeah, so check that out. I don't think I'm doing anything here. I'm doing some stuff at Spirit Rock and a couple retreats in the next couple months there. And then I think in the new year, what we'll do, I'm going to start doing monthly things which are like maybe 4 or 5 hours where you can sit, but then I'll do a 15-minute meeting. We'll just 15. There are a lot of you and anyone doing that in the Sangha. Classes are the rent and salary supported by you and so your generosity is much appreciated, and I think allows us to make this accessible so that people who can't pay feel fully welcome. So thank you for that. Yeah. It's nice to be with you. Thanks for volunteers, everybody. That's like a lot happens for us just to sit here. So thank you. Okay, you be well. See you soon.